Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is, this expectation of absolute precision. Like
Uh,
you break your arm, the x-ray shows a jagged white line, and the doctor just points right at the film. The problem is visible.
yeah, it's perfectly categorized.
Exactly. But step into the world of genetics and preventative health, and, well, that x-ray machine just shatters. We find ourselves looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
Because we enter the realm of probabilities rather than certainties.
Mm-hmm.
And, that ambiguity makes people very uncomfortable, especially when they try to care for a dependent.
Absolutely. So, welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a highly detailed transcript today from the Dog Health Academy, and we're focusing specifically on the Siberian Husky.
Which is great because the lessons buried in this material really apply to anyone trying to make sense of hereditary health info.
Right, because we are hit with this massive contradiction right in the opening paragraphs. Okay, let's unpack this. The source states the Siberian Husky is generally considered one of the healthiest, most robust, purebred dogs in existence.
But in the exact same breath, it lists a heavy documented catalog of inherited common health problems.
I mean, the initial reaction for any reader is just pure confusion. Meet the paragon of canine health, and here is its giant list of impending diseases.
Yeah, it sounds totally backward.
So our mission today is to decode that paradox. We want to equip you, the listener, with the ultimate superpower of the informed learner, which is replacing paralyzing fear with actionable biological knowledge.
Because to reconcile a supposedly healthy breed with a long list of diseases, we have to recognize a basic biological reality. Structurally sound and risk-free are two completely different concepts.
It's like there's no such thing as a biologically perfect organism, right?
Exactly. Every purebred dog population has a closed gene pool. So over generations, as breeders select for specific traits, like a husky's incredible cold tolerance or sled-pulling stamina, they inadvertently bottleneck other genes.
Right. Though, I mean, the husky holds up incredibly well compared to breeds with extreme physical traits like the compromised airways of bulldogs or...
Or the elongated spines of dachshunds, for sure. They are built like true canine athletes. But that closed gene pool still carries specific, localized vulnerabilities.
So before we get into the specific ailments mentioned in the source, the eyes, the skin, the joints, we need to establish the lens through which you should actually view all this genetic data.
Yeah, because reading a list of potential diseases without context is just a recipe for a panic attack.
It really is.
This raises an important question, though. What exactly does it mean when a medical professional says a population is predisposed to something? Because understanding that is the single most crucial distinction in our source material today.
A hereditary predisposition is just a statistical probability, right?
Yes, exactly. It is a data point. It is not a tragic prophecy etched in stone.
I like to think about a genetic predisposition like living in a city that has a statistically high risk of rain. Let's use Seattle.
Okay, sure.
Just because you live in Seattle, it does not mean a thunderstorm is pouring on your head right this very second. It doesn't mean it will rain every single day of your life.
Right, but it does mean you should probably own a sturdy umbrella.
Exactly. And you should check the weather forecast way more frequently than someone living in the Mojave Desert.
That's a really perfect analogy. Hearing that huskies are prone to certain diseases shouldn't translate in your mind to a guarantee of illness. The predisposition is just a spotlight.
Telling you where to look.
Right. It tells owners and veterinarians exactly where to shine the flashlight during a routine checkup. The source's core philosophy here is that fear rarely helps a dog, but targeted vigilance absolutely changes outcomes.
So, applying that spotlight to the most well-documented area of husky genetic risk brings us to how they actually process sensory input. We are talking about the eyes. The source outlines 3 specific conditions, and they basically operate like a lineup of silent thieves. First is juvenile cataracts.
Biologically, a cataract is a structural failure of the lens inside the eye. The lens is supposed to be crystal clear, functioning a lot like a camera lens to focus incoming light onto the retina.
But something goes wrong.
Yeah, due to a genetic trigger, the proteins that make up that lens begin to misfold and clump together. This creates an opaque, cloudy barrier that physically blocks light from passing through.
Wait, aren't cataracts strictly an old dog problem? You see that cloudy bluish haze on the eyes of a 14-year-old dog and you just write it off as old age?
And the tragedy of that assumption is that it catches owners completely off guard.
Mm-hmm.
The word juvenile is the critical warning here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in huskies, this specific genetic form of cataracts doesn't wait for the cellular breakdown of old age. The genetic trigger can activate when the dog is just 2 or 3 years old.
That's the absolute prime of their young adult life. So an owner might notice a little unusual reflection or a slight cloudiness in their 3-year-old dog's eye and just completely dismiss it.
Because they figure the dog is far too young for cataracts, so it must be a trick of the light or some harmless sleep in the eye.
Right.
But by the time they realize it isn't a trick of the light, the internal architecture of the lens is often severely compromised. The cloudiness is spread, and the vision loss is really significant.
That is so tough. And then the source mentions progressive retinal atrophy next, or PRA. What struck me here is that unlike a cataract clouding the front window of the eye, this is happening in the deep background.
Yes, all the way in the back.
So how does an owner even spot tissue degrading on the retina if they can't physically see it?
Well, observational vigilance becomes your best diagnostic tool.
Mm-hmm.
The retina is like the light-sensing wallpaper at the back of the eye. It is packed with photoreceptor cells, rods, and cones. With PRA, those cells undergo a programmed genetic death. They literally wither away. But the rods, which are responsible for processing low light, usually die first.
Oh, I see. So the earliest sign isn't the dog bumping into walls in the middle of the afternoon?
Exactly. The early signs are incredibly subtle behavioral adaptations. You might notice your husky hesitating to walk from a brightly lit hallway into a dim living room.
Or maybe they seem less confident in the backyard at dusk.
Or they might suddenly refuse to go down the stairs at night, because in full daylight, the remaining healthy cone cells are getting plenty of stimulation, so their vision seems perfectly normal.
It would be so easy to misinterpret that. You just think, oh, he's being clumsy today, or, he's just being weird about the stairs.
Yeah, the brain writes it off as a quirk.
And then we have the third eye condition, corneal dystrophy.
So the cornea is the clear, protective outer dome of the eye. Corneal dystrophy involves a metabolic glitch, where the body deposits materials, often lipids or cholesterols, right within that clear surface layer.
So it creates a cloudy, sometimes crystalline or sparkly appearance on the surface of the eye.
Yes, but unlike PRA or severe cataracts, corneal dystrophy usually doesn't progress to the point of significant vision loss.
I imagine it still looks deeply alarming to an owner, though, to suddenly see a sparkly white film on their dog's eye.
Oh, it absolutely warrants a visit to a veterinary ophthalmologist to confirm the diagnosis and ensure it isn't something more destructive.
Right.
But looking at all three of these conditions, juvenile cataracts, PRA, and corneal dystrophy, a massive unifying theme emerges regarding husky genetics.
They all operate totally under the radar. There is no sudden morning where the dog wakes up completely blind and yelping in pain.
The degradation is frustratingly gradual. The dog's brain slowly adapts to the fading light, and the owner slowly adapts to the dog's subtle behavioral changes.
Which perfectly explains why routine specialized eye exams are absolutely vital for this breed, even when the dog appears to have eagle-eye vision.
You are trying to catch the thief while they are still picking the lock, rather than waiting until the house is completely empty.
That is such a good way to put it. It is fascinating that the eye issues are all about localized tissue degradation over time. But when we move to the next major risk factor in the source material, we encounter an entirely different kind of failure.
Yeah, we're moving from sensory processing to metabolic processing.
The source introduces this highly specific quirk called zinc-responsive dermatosis.
This condition is heavily concentrated in northern breeds, huskies, malamutes, samoyeds. The symptoms manifest visually on the outside. Crustas, severely thickened skin, or hair loss.
And it's highly localized, right?
Right, usually targeting the face, specifically around the eyes, the muzzle, the chin, and sometimes the pressure points on the paws.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When I first read the term zinc-responsive, my brain immediately jumped to a dietary deficiency. I thought, the dog simply isn't getting enough zinc in their bowl, so the owner just needs to buy a more expensive, higher quality kibble.
Most people do think that.
But the text makes it clear that assumption is entirely wrong. Think of this condition like a high-performance car that has a completely full tank of premium gas, but the fuel line leading to the engine is physically clogged.
Yes. The problem does not originate at the gas station. Modern, commercially balanced dog food contains plenty of dietary zinc.
So what's the actual issue?
The problem is a genetic defect in the husky's intestinal tract. Their biological mechanics limit their ability to actually pull that zinc across the intestinal wall and absorb it into the bloodstream.
Wow, but why does a lack of zinc cause the skin to crust and thicken so violently?
Well, zinc is a critical trace mineral. It's essential for DNA synthesis and cellular replication. And the skin is your dog's largest organ. Skin cells are constantly dying and rapidly dividing to replace themselves.
Okay, so when those rapidly dividing cells are starved of zinc, the entire replication process derails.
Exactly. The skin cells divide abnormally, causing a condition called hyperkeratosis, where thick, crusty layers of unshed skin build up.
Connecting this to the broader landscape of veterinary care perfectly illustrates why a professional diagnosis is so critical. Because if an owner misinterprets the crusty skin as a simple food allergy or a cheap kibble issue,
They might spend 6 months cycling through every boutique, grain-free, novel protein dog food on the market.
and they will spend hundreds of dollars doing it while the dog continues to suffer because the metaphorical fuel line is still clogged. Switching kibble brands just cannot fix an intestinal malabsorption issue.
The treatment actually has to bypass the genetic bottleneck entirely. Veterinarians often prescribe specialized, highly bioavailable zinc supplements.
So these are specific molecular forms of zinc.
Yes, sometimes combined with essential fatty acids that force their way through the intestinal barrier, or in severe cases, zinc is administered intravenously. You just cannot guess your way out of zinc-responsive dermatosis with a new bag of dog food.
Okay, so moving inward from the visible signs on the skin, the source material takes us deeper under the hood to the hidden mechanics of the dog's structure and their internal engine.
All right, we need to examine their joints and their thyroid. Let's look at hip dysplasia.
Hip dysplasia is essentially an architectural flaw in the dog's skeletal frame.
Yeah, the hip is a ball and socket joint. In a healthy joint, the femoral head, the ball, fits snugly and deeply into the pelvic socket. It glides smoothly with every single stride, cushioned by a layer of slick cartilage.
The source points out a really interesting statistic here, actually. Huskies have a lower reported rate of hip dysplasia than many other large breeds, like German Shepherds or Golden Retrievers.
But lower incidence does not mean immunity. In a dysplastic dog, the fit between the ball and the socket is loose. There is laxity in the joint.
And as the dog walks, runs, and plays, that loose ball rattles around inside the socket.
Exactly. Over time, that unnatural mechanical friction acts like sandpaper. It aggressively wears down the protective cartilage, leading to bone rubbing directly on bone, chronic inflammation, and eventually painful osteoarthritis.
I always pictured hip dysplasia as a dog walking with a dramatic, pronounced limp. But the signs can be much more mechanical, almost like the dog is trying to rewrite its own physics to avoid the pain.
You often see a change in their gait before you see a limp. They might develop a bunny hopping run, where both back legs push off the ground simultaneously.
Why do they do that?
They do this to shift the propulsive force away from the independent rotation of the hips and into the lower back. You might notice they hesitate to jump into the back of an SUV, or they suddenly need a running start to get up a flight of stairs they used to bound up effortlessly.
That structural wear and tear leads us right into the internal engine issues. The source details hypothyroidism as a major metabolic threat.
The thyroid gland, located in the neck, is the body's master thermostat and metabolism regulator.
Okay.
It pumps out thyroxine, a hormone that dictates how fast every single cell in the body converts nutrients into energy. Hypothyroidism means that gland is underactive and failing to produce enough thyroxine. The entire cellular engine basically bogs down.
And this condition typically appears in middle-aged dogs. The symptoms listed are unexplained weight gain, constantly seeking out warm spots in the house, profound sluggishness, and a dull, thin coat.
Right.
Let me play devil's advocate for a moment here. If I have a 6 or 7-year-old husky who is putting on a few pounds, sleeping more, and acting a bit lazy, isn't the most logical conclusion just that my dog is getting older?
What's fascinating here is you have just articulated the most dangerous trap in pet ownership,
Yeah.
because none of those symptoms are exclusive to a failing thyroid gland.
Oh, I see.
A dog slowing down on walks could just be natural aging. A dog gaining weight could just be getting too many treats from the kids. A dog hesitating on the stairs could just be tired from a long play session.
Yeah, the human brain naturally seeks the simplest, least frightening explanation. We assume normal aging.
The key word the source material uses to break through that assumption is persistence. A single off day or even a lazy week is not cause for panic.
But a persistent, ongoing change.
Yes, a persistent change in energy baseline, a steady weight gain without a diet change, or a constant desire to sleep near the heating vent. These are major red flags.
Because metabolism literally generates body heat. When the thyroid fails, the internal furnace goes out.
A sudden, persistent shift in their baseline demands a vet visit and comprehensive blood work. Normal aging is a very slow, almost imperceptible gradient over years. Blood work will definitively reveal if the thyroxine levels have plummeted.
And the brilliant part of catching this is that the treatment is usually an inexpensive daily synthetic hormone pill. It essentially turns the furnace back on and gives the dog their entire life back.
Exactly. It's highly manageable.
Well, we have spent a lot of time discussing the genetic lottery eyes, skin, joints, thyroid. It can feel heavy, almost like the dog's fate is completely pre-written.
But the source material makes a very deliberate pivot here. It moves to the empowering part of the text, which is the variables the owner completely controls.
Right, shifting from the hand you are dealt to how you strategically play your cards.
And the single biggest modifiable risk factor for a husky is obesity.
Which is uniquely challenging for this specific breed. You have to look at what they were engineered to do. They were bred by the Chukchi people to pull sleds across frozen tundras for hundreds of miles, surviving on tiny scraps of frozen fish or seal meat.
Their metabolism is fiercely, relentlessly efficient. They are the ultimate fuel-efficient biological vehicle.
Built to survive.
Their bodies are designed to extract and store every single calorie from their food because, historically, starvation was always a threat.
But when you take a dog with the cellular machinery of an Arctic endurance athlete and place them in a modern suburban home where their most strenuous daily task is walking to the mailbox,
that metabolic efficiency turns into a liability. The weight sneaks up on them incredibly fast because they simply do not need the amount of food most owners assume a large dog needs.
And excess weight is the ultimate negative multiplier for everything else we have discussed today.
Absolutely. If a dog has mild, undiagnosed hip dysplasia, maintaining a lean, athletic body condition might mean they never show a single symptom of pain in their entire life.
Because the muscular support is strong and the load is light.
Right. But if you add 10 or 15 extra pounds of fat to that frame, you exponentially increase the mechanical wear and tear on that loose joint with every single step.
Wow.
Furthermore, adipose tissue body fat is not just inert blubber. It is an active endocrine organ that secretes inflammatory cytokines into the bloodstream.
So obesity literally bathes the already damaged joints in a chemical soup that accelerates cartilage destruction.
Yes. Maintaining a lean body condition is the single most proactive, protective action an owner can take.
So how does an owner balance all of this? How do we stay vigilant about these persistent changes in vision, skin, mobility, and weight without becoming a deeply anxious helicopter owner who rushes to the emergency vet every time the dog sneezes?
The source anchors everything on a very specific philosophy of knowledge and tracking. They mention an app called VitalPet, but the digital tool itself matters far less than the habit it builds. You must establish and track your dog's baseline.
Ah, the boiling frog syndrome applies perfectly here. If you see your dog every single day, the gradual weight gain or the slowly increasing hesitation on the stairs becomes invisible to you.
You can't notice a deviation if you don't actually know what normal looks like on paper. Keep a health history log, weigh them regularly, note their normal activity levels.
And when you observe a subtle change, they bump into the coffee table, they are obsessively licking a crusty spot on their paw, they hesitate before jumping into the car, write it down.
And if that note repeats for a week or two, that is your signal to call the vet. Getting ahead of a problem early, especially a degenerative one, leads to vastly better, cheaper, and less painful outcomes than waiting until the symptoms are screaming at you.
For sure. And the ultimate preventative step actually happens before the dog even enters your home, which is responsible breeding practices.
The text heavily emphasizes that many of these inherited conditions, particularly the devastating eye diseases and hip dysplasia, have specialized genetic screening tests and physical evaluations available.
So a responsible, ethical breeder tests the parent dogs extensively before ever deciding to breed them.
Yes, and they will gladly hand you the official certifications.
So if a breeder dismisses your questions about genetic screening or claims their specific lines are, perfectly healthy so they don't need tests, you turn around or walk away.
Run away. Complex genetics mean there are never absolute guarantees in biology, but starting with rigorously screened parent dogs drastically stacks the statistical odds in your favor.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive with a paradox, the robustly healthy dog burdened with a long list of genetic risks. But the husky is fundamentally a structurally sound, incredibly resilient animal.
Their health isn't guaranteed by magic. It is actively maintained by an informed owner who understands how to shine the flashlight on the right areas. It is the difference between navigating a dark room blindly and walking through it with a map and a lantern.
Before we wrap up, there was a brief, fascinating tease at the very end of our source material. It mentioned that episode 6 would cover the Huskies' famously independent and often stubborn behavioral nature and how differently their brains work.
That tease leaves us with a profoundly provocative question to ponder. We spend our lives firmly separating physical health from behavior. When a dog disobeys, we assume it is a training issue.
Right.
But how often might a dog's supposedly stubborn, independent, or difficult behavioral quirks actually be a hidden, undiagnosed physical ailment?
That forces a complete reevaluation of how we interact with them.
Consider the husky who suddenly refuses to go up the stairs when called, or the dog who acts skittish and hesitant in a dimly lit room. Are they truly just being a stubborn, fiercely independent northern breed asserting their dominance?
Or is that behavioral refusal actually a desperate, silent whisper? Like, could that stubbornness be the very first sign of bone rubbing on bone in their dysplastic hips, or the fading twilight vision of their retinas slowly dying?
Slapping a label of stubborn or lazy on a living creature is incredibly easy. But true understanding requires looking past the convenient behavioral surface to make sure the biological mechanics are actually working first.
You have to replace assumptions with genuine curiosity.
And replace paralyzing fear with actionable knowledge.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep observing the baselines, keep questioning the simple explanations, and we will see you next time.